Jim Nantz Award. Just take me. I've asked everyone to take me back through, when you first found out about applying for it and what it
Yeah.
was, and putting together your reel that you submitted.
Yeah. So, I knew about the award from previous classes at Syracuse and WAER, and the years before people had applied and saw where they had ranked. So, my junior year is when I first put together the application. I was looking for something to make it a little bit different. So, like, I had a stretch of basketball play-by-play and a stretch of lacrosse play-by-play that I liked, but I also put my best WAR radio feature that I had done on the reel as well. I thought maybe something to make it a little bit different than, say, 20 minutes straight of play-by-play. Obviously fortunate with the opportunities that we get at Syracuse to have some pretty cool games to put on that reel. I had a stretch from the Sweet 16 when Syracuse played Wisconsin, and a stretch from a Syracuse-Virginia lacrosse game that had gone down to the wire. So certainly was fortunate there. So I applied, and then when they announced the top 20 that year, we were down in Villanova. We were actually at a hotel room for a Syracuse lacrosse game against Villanova. So I was there with my classmate Andrew Cannell, and we kind of watched it all come through, and got down to the last few, and a lot of my friends had already shown up in the All-America honors and things, and kind of had the feeling once he said that our last winner is from Syracuse. Heard my name, was really exciting. It's great to be with a couple of close friends when it happened, and the other really fun part of that is the person who finished second my year, John Nolan, was my roommate. We the same summer internship together that year as well, and one of my best friends. So that was a lot of fun to see him finish so high as well.
And what did you do to celebrate?
I called a lacrosse game that night, I guess. Took a phone call. I called my parents, talked to John Schlesnick, and then we had a Syracuse-Villanova lacrosse game. And at the time, Villanova was very highly ranked. So we locked in, got ready to go, and called the game that night.
Nice. And then you knew that part of the deal was you got to come to our awards weekend at Salisbury at the time. I've asked everybody, what was your preconceived notion of the awards weekend?
I don't know if I had any preconceived notion. I was obviously really excited to go down and meet as many people as possible. So I knew going in that there'd be a lot of people I'd grown up watching and grown up looking up to that would be there, and I wanted to meet as many of them as possible. Obviously, there were some slight butterflies, and that you're going to be meeting that many people and making a speech on the award stage that night that I think was a precursor to Bob Costas giving a speech that night. So not like he was an easy act to lead off for, but I would say I didn't know all that much actually what would be going on outside of the seminars and things that were on the schedule, but it was a blast. And if I had preconceived notions, I'm not sure that they would have matched with how it actually played out.
Yeah, even to this day, every year for me, you'd be in the lobby on banquet night before you go down in for the dinner, and it's, what am I doing here with all these people? Right?
Yeah. I think I walked in, and when I first got to the hotel, I'm lobby just on that first day. There were, you saw Gene Deckeroff and Wes Durham and some of the other folks that have become mainstays at the banquet each year, and everyone's already getting along and chatting. So you just kind of dove right in, and everybody was great and really welcoming too. Which you never know when you're, at the time I was 19 years old or 20 years old. 19 years old at the time. So you just don't know if they're gonna walk right in and accept this young whippersnapper. But they were great the whole time.
How many relationships did you make or develop while you were there?
It's hard to put a real number on it because I think I think to me the coolest relationship I made during that was Jim Jackson, who was the Flyers play-by-play guy and a Syracuse alum. My mom's from Philly, so I've always been a Philadelphia sports fan, listened to him call a lot of Flyers games, and we sat together the night we all had barbecue. And since then, he's critiqued at least one or two of my hockey reels every season. And it's hard to find a lot of people that critique hockey because it's a sport that's so, is kind of off on its own compared to the folks who do football, basketball, baseball, things like that. I've stayed in touch with West Durham. I met Alex Faust in person for the first time. We ended up working together for a while after that and still stay in touch. And I mean, that's just a few, but I mean, I think I have exchanged emails back and forth with at least 10 people, 15 people from that trip, and continue to exchange emails with them. So that obviously is the awards cool, but the most valuable part of that trip is the people that you get to meet along the way.
All about the relationships, as we know.
Yep.
And going into your senior year, did you have the big head going back? As the
I think you'd have to ask my WAER classmates. I tried not to, and honestly, I think the internship I had that summer was really good for that. I worked with Jason Benetti and Kevin Brown at the Syracuse Chiefs, and they made sure to make sure that I knew, like, okay, this is a great award, and it means you've accomplished a lot for what you've done right now, but like, this is just a starting point. Now, where do you go from here? And that's how I tried to approach things going forward.
And so, as we did when we started, we were the first class to do Syracuse Chiefs. To be able to do professional baseball while you're still in school, how did that help you?
Yeah, I mean, so I did a different baseball job each summer, starting in summer collegiate leagues. After my freshman year, I was in the New York Collegiate Baseball League, then the Cape League, and then that next year doing the Chiefs. The biggest thing I think you learn doing professional baseball is you learn all of the stuff that goes into that job that doesn't actually entail broadcasting, and learn how then you carve out the time to make sure you're still properly preparing for your broadcast. So, you're in there at 9, 10 a.m. doing game notes, printing stat packs, all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden you've gotten an email for 3 press releases, and now it's 5:30 and the first pitch is at 7, and you haven't even looked at your lineup yet. You learn how to manage time like that. And that was really valuable for me, because my first real job after my senior year was with the Dayton Dragons. And they are an organization that runs like a baseball team on one side, but like a community entertainment industry on the other side. And, they have 50 people in their front office for single A baseball. And I mean, the press releases and the activities they do outside of baseball are a real full-time job there. So to learn how to balance time and know what was coming going into that, I think was really valuable.
That's some great training too, to kind of get a little bit out of your comfort zone and learn new things.
Yeah. And again, particularly when I worked with the Chiefs, working with Jason and Kevin and getting them to critique my stuff. Obviously, they're two of the best, so that pushed me as well. And then working in Dayton with Tom Nichols, who's been in minor league baseball now for about 3 decades. You learn a lot about the industry. And I tell every kid in college, whether you love baseball or not, you should do at least 1 year of full season minor league baseball, because it just makes you better. To be on the air 140 times in 150 days, you're bound to get better. You have to get better. That's the only way to stay interesting throughout the course of a whole season.
And you find out if you really want to do it for a living too.
Yep. Yeah. And hey, for me, I realized that, minor league baseball was not necessarily my cup of tea. I haven't done it since that first year. I like doing college sports. I like doing Olympic sports that I do with NBC and things like that. And minor league baseball wasn't necessarily my favorite thing to do. But I still think it was a really formative experience that helped me in the other sports and the other jobs that I do now.
I just want to go back to the awards weekend for a sec. You touched on the seminars. I don't know if that was the first year. I think that was the first year we did.
I think it was the first year. Yeah.
Remind me, or what do you remember from?
All right, so I remember to me, the ones I remember the most. I remember Tom Bowman's presentation, because obviously, I think when you're in school, particularly, but even out of school and really starting to work in the industry, it's easier to make connections with people who are other broadcasters, and you can get a lot of great feedback from other broadcasters, and that's really valuable, and you should always do that. But it's harder, and at the end of the day, actually probably more important to get that feedback and make those relationships with people who can actually hire you and give you a job. And so to get the perspective from Tom on, what people in a position like that are hiring are looking for, that was really valuable. I remember Bob Costas swung by. That was his Hall of Fame year, so he spoke for a while as well, which was great. See, Wyatt Thompson spoke. See, I think I
Dave
remember.
from Bradley.
Yeah, yep. And then we did a big listening session too, where people could play, a stretch of their own, and everyone would kind of listen and critique it. And I always find that really valuable, not just having people critique my work, but hearing other people's work as well. So those are the things I really remember from that day. Leading up to the banquet, obviously missed the 18 holes of golf, which would have been fun as well. But no, it was that really valuable seminar, and glad that it has continued since that first year. And I think the other thing I remember is how many eager people were at the seminar that wanted to learn. It's fun to be around other people at a similar stage that are just really looking to learn and exchange ideas as well.
Yeah, and I didn't ask you, how nervous were you when before the award presentation, and then you have to get up and speech?
Yeah, I was pretty nervous, partially because I had talked to Alex Faust, and I don't think he gave a speech the year before. I think I was the first one, so I think I didn't really know that was happening until I got down there, which obviously made me a little bit more nervous. And like I said, you're up there in front of Bob Costas, who's going to give a speech after you. You're in front of 100 of the best broadcasters in the country or more. But I think I just went up there and wanted to make sure I remembered to thank everybody who I needed to thank, and made sure to thank my parents, because that was obviously the most important part. And once I was done, able to relax a little bit. But yeah, I think for the hour or two before, when a lot of the early socializing was going on, I definitely had part of my brain on what I was going to say up there.
All right, so you do a little minor league baseball. You graduate from college.
Yeah.
You do Dayton and fill in the remaining years up until
Yeah.
now for me.
So I've been in the Boston area ever since. Started with the fall of 2013. I had an offer to do some games at Harvard and do some games at a Division III school in Boston. So did that. I did some games for free for another college that year that was just starting stuff, which then turned into a paying game the next year. And what I always say is, I think the way that the industry has changed from even when I was in college. And when I was in college, everybody thought, okay, you go, and if you want to do college play-by-play, you get a job at a school where you're probably doing their women's basketball and their baseball and sidelines for football. And then you look for another school that might then be hiring for the play-by-play for football. Nowadays, because everybody's doing these video streams, there's a real argument to be made that you base yourself in either a big city or a place that's close to home for you, a place you have some familiarity. You start with whatever you can find, and then if you do a good job and you work at getting in front of people, your name gets around and it grows. So, for 2-3 years, I would say I continued to just grow with schools in the Boston area. I started doing things for Providence, Northeastern, Boston College, things like that. And then the first break outside of the Boston area was for a network called One World Sports that no longer exists, but they were based in Stamford, Connecticut. And they had the U.S. rights to a lot of international sports. So I'd be in there at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning calling a Chinese Basketball Association game, or the KHL, which is the Russian hockey league. And we did Yomiuri Giants baseball. So I was there a lot. I would drive down to Stamford in 2015 and 2016. And when I was down there for about 15 days out of a 30-day stretch in March to do the Chinese Basketball Association playoffs, I reached out to a Syracuse alum who was in the talent office at NBC. So they're based down there, and met with her, and they liked my stuff. And about a month later, I got a phone call that they had a role for me in the Rio Olympics. So I called, I was on what they call the swing team for the Rio Olympics, which was 5 play-by-play guys that covered 26 sports.
Wow.
So our room was 5 play-by-play guys and 26 different analysts and 5 producers. So I called judo, modern pentathlon, a couple of shooting events, the race walk, the 20-kilometer race walk, all for the regular cable feed. And then they also had a special 4K Ultra HD feed where I called the track and field, which was pretty great. And since then, I've I've continued to work with them. NBC has the Olympic channel, so I do a lot of shows for them in the wintertime. I do a lot of ski jumping and some alpine skiing. I've done some college hockey for NBC, and I've done some track and field. And I also do a lot of track for USA Track and Field, like the events that they hold. And then through my work with the Ivy League, I had done some Ivy football. And when that package shifted to ESPN, I got in front of the right people. And this year I did the Friday night Ivy League ESPNU games as well. So still doing some college stuff in the Boston area and doing as much for as many people as would like me to do it over the course of the year. And I think for me, the biggest thing has been doing as much as possible and as many different sports and being as versatile as possible, because everyone wants to call football and everyone wants to call basketball, and I enjoy calling those sports as well. But there are less people that a network is comfortable with calling and saying, "Hey, have you ever called wrestling before?" And you say, "No." And like, "Okay, well, we still think you'll be able to handle it. Here's this World Cup wrestling event this week." So I think that's kind of become my niche in the NBC world, at least, is that I'm one of the people that they can call for anything and know that I will be able to learn what I need to learn and all those different Olympic sports.
I was going to ask, when you do pentathlon and you do judo, and I'm guessing you've never done those events before. How do you prepare to call that?
Yeah, so the judo, which was the first few Olympic events that I was doing, I watched, like, the International Judo Federation has a YouTube page where they show all their World Cups, and they have a guy who calls all of them regularly. So I probably watched, 10, 15 hours of judo and saw what he was calling, saw what he was focusing on, made sure I was really familiar with the rule book. And then on top of that, you know how to stay in your lane. So, at the Olympics, my job as the play-by-play guy is much more the background, the stories. And yes, you have to explain the rules, but don't try to be the expert. That's what you've got your analyst there for. Let your analyst be the expert who's describing what this throw was and why this person scored 3 points, So that's the biggie. Like, obviously learn the rules and learn as much about all the people as you can, but also know how to effectively work with your analyst so that they're into the nitty gritty and you don't make yourself sound silly by trying to be an expert on a sport that you clearly are not an expert in.
Well, and I would guess it also takes time. I mean, even if you work with one analyst all the time, it takes time to develop the rapport. When you're working with 5 or 6 or however many sports you do, different analysts, that's going to be a challenge as well.
Well, the scary part, the judo analyst I worked with, Leo White, who's an Olympian, he was an Olympian back in the 80s, but still looks like he could do some serious damage. If I would ask him a question about a different move or things like that in between broadcasts, he would demonstrate it on me. So I was putting my life at risk every time I asked Leo to demonstrate something for me.
What we will do for our careers. And the gentleman who just moderated our last podcast you're very familiar with, Jack Ford, who you've worked with a lot. Yes.
Yeah. Jack is great and perfect for those Ivy League shows because I think the Ivy, in a way, one of the reasons that I enjoy Ivy League stuff is it's very similar to the Olympic sports, that the game is important, but the stories are equally as important because you just have some really impressive student athletes. Like, sure, the great thing about Ivy football, there's 5 to 10 kids a year that might get a shot at the NFL because they play some high level football, but there's another 5 to 10 kids that may end up being like CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. Like, I remember vividly in 2016 when I was doing football, the Princeton quarterback at the time was writing his 50-page thesis during the fall season, and I was chatting with him, and he was writing a thesis on like cybersecurity in elections and things like that. And I was like, man, how many quarterbacks are on top of worrying about the playbook this week, also writing a 50-page thesis on cybersecurity? So the story's interesting. But Jack is great because he knows everybody. He has been in the league. He is a wonderful storyteller already, and he is honestly one of the nicest people you'll ever meet and the easiest people to work with ever. So I look forward to calling games with Jack every time I get the chance to.
Yeah. So where do you live?
I live in Southborough, Massachusetts, which is about 25 miles west of Boston.
Sure. And what are you doing now in this time of nothing?
I am still hosting a few podcasts and working on some features with some of the schools here in the Boston area to stay busy. And, we're all trying to figure out how to stay relevant during this time. And so are the universities that are trying to figure out what content is worthwhile and valuable when people are really hungry for it. And we've seen that. I interviewed Jeff Halfley, the Boston College football coach, for a podcast on Monday. And by Wednesday, it was already like the second most downloaded podcast we've ever done. And it had only been about 24 hours that it had been online. So, people want the content right now. And then outside of that, I have a 13 and a half month old who's a couple rooms over taking a nice nap right now. But my wife is still working full time. So I'm doing a lot of daddy daycare, and we're looking and reading and learning about as many different toddler activities as possible, because I feel like a couple weeks in, she's already played with every toy and explored every inch of the house. So we're getting a lot of good quality time, and it's been a lot of fun to get to spend extra time with her too.
So now my two boys were a little older when I was between jobs for about 9 months, but that time you will look back on and say, I had it, even though we had to sacrifice, our careers for a bit.
I do laugh that I think she's come out she's the happiest person in the world about everything that's going on right now, because her mommy and daddy are home all the time. So, she's learned where mommy does her work, and sometimes she'll just kind of run a few rooms over, start knocking on the door so she can come in and see her too. So I think little kids and dogs have come out very well during this.
Let's talk about your future now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've done lots of sports, different sports. Is that what you would like to continue doing, or do you have that level where I think most people say, I want to do network sports or NFL or whatever?
I mean, I like the position I'm in right now, but I certainly am looking to end up with a network that is my full-time home. And the reason that I like that idea best is because generally you still get the flexibility to do a few different sports over the course of a year as well. And, for me, I look forward to that. I look forward to the changing of events and changing of the seasons, and calling different games, different teams, different events, and learning about different athletes. Now, that being said, obviously if a major professional sports team came calling and said, hey, we want you to be our play-by-play guy in the NBA or the NHL or the NFL or the MLB, I would obviously listen and consider it. And guys like Jason Benetti have shown that you can do both. You can be a play-by-play guy for a pro sports team and still be a network announcer that does a bunch of different sports as well. But I really enjoy what I have right now in terms of getting to do a lot of different things. So I want to be able to keep doing different things, even if that means finding one network home down the road.
Now, are you completely freelance right now?
Yeah. It's interesting because some of the some of the jobs pay like you're an employee in terms of like a W-2, but there's still a game rate, and I still have the flexibility to play or to work for whoever. I don't have to worry about any like non-competes or anything like that. But yeah, everything is either like freelance or per game at this point.
Cool. I'm gonna once again violate what I learned at Syracuse. Final question. Never supposed to say it. If you were to go back now with your experience since you left college, or since you won the Jim Nantz Award, what advice would you give the 19-year-old you now?
I think that the number one thing I would say is work as aggressively to get to know people in production, talent, and behind the scenes roles while you're in college as I did to get to know as many broadcasters as possible. Obviously, those broadcaster critiques are really, really valuable, and especially in college when you're trying to learn. But again, the relationships you build with people in other aspects of the industry are really important. Again, at the end of the day, you have to know people who are going to hire you, first off. And then secondly, like the more you know about what goes on in the production preparation, the more you know about what goes on in the truck technically, the better position you'll be in. Because early on, for the most part, if you're working at a smaller university, they're going to be pulling their broadcasts along a little bit by the bootstraps, which means you may be the play-by-play guy. You may also be the person who's producing graphics during the week. You may also be the person who has to come up with ideas to make the broadcast better, but in a way that they can technically be executed. So I think learning as much as you can about the other side of broadcasting is really, really valuable. And then the other thing I would say is, I think when you're young and you're trying to, work your way up and do as well as you can, you focus sometimes so much on like trying to be technically perfect and trying to make sure you don't stumble over a word or this, that, or the other thing. I think I would tell my 19-year-old self, remember the most important thing is like, be a real person, have fun. It's okay to laugh a little bit and enjoy yourself, because at the end of the day, you're talking about sports and people are listening for enjoyment too.
Absolutely. And that's good. Back to your original point, it's good to understand everybody else's job. So,
Yeah.
If you ask them to do something, what that job entails.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Bill, I appreciate the time. It's good to
Thank you, Dave.
Always good to catch up, and hopefully you can come back for an awards weekend.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, it's funny, the ones the few years after. So I got married after my senior year. We got married on June 8th. So for like 4 or 5 years in a row, it was anniversary weekend, was also awards weekend, and after all the weekends being away to broadcast, my wife kind of had a claim to that. But I would love to come back down the road and see everybody again.